On September 13th, 2012, and I'm calling the board meeting for the Clackamas River Water District for, like I said, it said September 13th, to order. Dora, would you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Holloway.
Present.
Commissioner Kemper.
Here.
And Commissioner Sterling.
Present.
3 commissioners are present.
Commissioner Kehoe hasn't arrived yet, so would you join me in the salute the flag? Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Now, do we have introductions from the audience, please?
Carol Bright.
Starrett.
Carol Bright.
Bob George, District Engineer.
David Blair, citizen.
Melissa Franklin, CRW.
Adam Bjornstad, Clackamas River Water.
George Payne, Oakland Water District. Keith Miller, Sunrise Water.
Warren Mitchell.
Suzanne Lorenzo, Clackamas River Water. Tracy Triplett, Clackamas River Water.
Don Bunyard, CRW.
Kamkawinam, CRW.
Dora Campbell, Clackamas River Water.
Lee Moore, CRW.
Thank you. Let's see. The first item on the agenda today is to consider approval of resolution 02 for 2013. Carol, would you take that, please?
You guys didn't start yet, huh? We did?
We just now got started, and Carol is taking the action of the campus.
For the record, Commissioner Kehoe has arrived.
Barbara said that.
So this evening, I'm presenting the investment policy to the Board of Commissioners. We have resolution 022013 before you. Our policy is based on the ORS 294.035 and 294.040. We also have board policies, section 3.6. And within the board policies, one of the things is reporting requirements to the board. It requires reporting of our investment activity to the board at least quarterly. I report our cash and investment position to the board every month, so we're meeting those reporting requirements. We also have an investment policy which was brought to the board last year. It's policy 1-2.6001. So why is the board looking at this again? We have best practices suggest that the board take a look at the investment policy on an annual basis. So if you look at the policy, and the policy itself was included in the board packet on page 5, the only change that has been made to the policy this year compared with last year is we updated the maximum allowable investment to the Oregon Local Government Investment Pool, the LGFP. And this isn't, I mean, it's not a significant change. It doesn't really have any impact on CRW because we don't have $44 million in the pool. But it's just as they updated every year to the Portland CPI, I just thought, let's go ahead and get the policy as current as possible. And that's one of the things that we've done with the policies is we've developed a mechanism to review them periodically so that we don't end up down the road with a whole lot of policies that haven't been looked at in 10 years.
Carol, what is it being increased from?
The original policy said $30 million, which was the original dollar amount that was allowed. But in fact, the original policy should have said, you know, it was like 43 million something.
Now, when you say original, are you talking about the one the Cochrane document replaced, or are you talking about, so
The
which one are you
policy-
talking
The
about?
policy that was presented to the board last year said 30 million. And again, it doesn't have an impact on CRW because we're not bumping up against that limit. But as I was going through and reviewing the policy, if you look at the treasurer's and the ORS, it'll say 30 million unless you have to go to a different place to see all the updates. But I did find the updates and I included the actual current amount.
That's the only change.
Yes. Everything else in the investment policy has remained the same. So we have policy objectives, and we start with legality, so obviously we're not going to invest in anything that's illegal. Safety, rate of return, liquidity, and yield. Yield is really kind of at the bottom of our threshold because we have much more concern with the preservation of principal. So the investment policy at 2.2.3 says that what we should strive for is at least equal to the 360-day yield on a treasury bill. So I looked that up. The current, effective as of September 7th, the treasury yield for the one-year treasury was 0.18%. The local government investment pool, where all of our funds are, is returning 0.6%. Seems really low, but based on what the market is doing right now, and I heard just this morning on the radio that the Fed has basically said they're going to hold the line on interest rates probably until 2015. So we don't anticipate seeing very many, very significant increases in interest earnings. So the 0.6%, while very low, is actually a pretty good return in this day and age. So what are other people getting? And again, I told you that the Treasury was at 0.18%. The Washington State LGIP is getting 0.18%. The Idaho LGIP is getting 0.19, so a couple of our neighbors. The California Pooled Money Investment, they do theirs a little bit differently than we do, but they're in 0.377. So again, the state of Oregon is managing the LGIP really well. So we're fortunate that we're getting that kind of return. So what I'm asking today, obviously after any questions that you may have for me, is for the board to approve resolution 022013, approving the updated investment policy.
Are there any questions for Carol? Commissioner Sterling?
Would you look at page 1, please, for me, of your actual, what you say is not changed? Are you contending that on page 1, starting policy 1-2.6.001, investments through, what's the last page here?
Page 10.
Through page 10, that there is no changes to that whatsoever?
Well, I will say that we did the subsequent review and resolution August 31st, 2012, with the next scheduled review date of August 31st, 2013. So that is a change. The policy was re-signed by the general manager. But other than that, the only change in the policy was on page 5, I believe it's page 5, where we changed in the very bottom paragraph the maximum amount that is allowed by any government entity in the state of Oregon to be invested in the LGIP.
Would you read to the public and the ratepayers and everyone in this room what the first 2 words are on the title of each of the pages? What does it say?
Operations manual?
So that's a complete change, isn't it?
No, this is exactly the same policy that was presented to the board last year in August.
This, in fact, is going out of the board policy book into that big fat binder over there with complete control by the general manager.
No, this does not change the board policy, and the board policy 3.6, this dovetails, this provides the additional information about the operationally how we're going to accomplish board policy 3.6 to manage investments for the district.
What's the purpose in putting those two words there on the title?
Well, there's different policy
I'm
manuals.
asking Ms. Bright.
Well, no, I can say something. I think that you might be, I don't know if you're confusing two different manuals. One's the board policy, and then the other one is the operations manual. So I don't know if you're confusing the two. Commissioner Sterling?
What is the purpose of putting the words operational manual on these 10 pages?
Because it's in the operations manual.
Where is the operations manual?
It's right here.
It's right there.
Why has it not been provided to the board?
Okay, well,
Right here.
these are different questions, Commissioner Sterling.
It hasn't been approved by the
That has nothing to do
board.
with this.
It does,
Well,
it's not
it's-
supposed to be approved by the board.
It's in the general manager's contract. He puts together the operations manual. We've gone over this every meeting, and I'm not wasting.
The general
any more time,
manager's
so-
contract is very clear and concise. He has only the authority on personnel issues, period. It
No,
just says that in his
No,
contract.
that is not true.
Yes, it is.
And
Look
what
at his
she's
contract.
asking is
Mr.
for
Sterling, I
us-
would have you look at page 4 of our policies, 3.6.
I'm talking about your
I'm
contract.
talking about
He
my
all said that
contract,
your
which talks
contract-
about the policy. My contract references these policies. We went over this at the last meeting. It says the general manager or his designee is the investment officer on page 4, under 3.6.
Well, first, I want to know if Commissioner Sterling is done with his questions.
Yeah, I'm perfectly satisfied that this is going to go into a black book over there on his desk that no one's looked at except for Cochran and him, perhaps you and Phillips also too.
It's right there. If you want to take a look at it, go pick it up.
No, it's on disk. You could have it right here.
There
Okay.
you go. There's a disc. Pick up a disc.
May I, Commissioner?
First, I want to know if Commissioner Sterling is done. We have a copy of the policy. It's right in front of us.
Which none of, at least I, have never seen in its entirety.
Well, it's
Having,
right there.
it having,
It's right there. Why don't you come see us
Okay.
next to Commissioner Sterling
Okay.
and see if he would mind
excuse me,
sharing-
Commissioner,
Well, maybe-
either you are going to
maybe-
allow Commissioner
maybe he would
Sterling to
mind
speak
sharing-
or me.
Do you mind sharing that book, Commissioner Sterling, with Commissioner?
Yeah, as soon
Conway?
as I'm done with it, as thick as it is, excuse me, I'm sure it'll take at least 5 business days for me to look
Do you
at.
have additional
Didn't you say
discs?
it's on a disc?
It's right here. You
Okay.
Take the
you
disc.
asked me at the last meeting to make it available electronically. I'm bringing it to this meeting, and it's being made available electronically.
Can you pass it out, please?
Yes.
To- Okay. Yes, Carol?
I would just like to say that I understand there's a discussion now about the overall operations policies, but what I'm presenting to the board
Yes,
this
I need to
evening
compare it to the disc.
is the resolution for the investment policy. And the investment policy was brought to the board last August and was approved. And again, the only change that has been made is we've noted the update dates, which we will do on all policies as we move forward. And we updated the dollar amount, that's the maximum allowable in the local government investment pool. This policy is a little bit different from most of the other policies in the operations manual because this policy has been brought to the board in the past. It has not been brought annually, which, as I said, is best practices. It was brought to the board a year ago, and I think prior to that, it was brought to the board in 2007. When we updated this as part of the operations policy booklet, we basically reformatted it so it would look like all of the policies, but we didn't change the content or the structure of the investment policy. So this policy has been approved by the board many times over the last 10 to 15 years.
Commissioner Holloway?
I do remember this coming before the board last August. I voted against it then,
I did too.
in part because that this is linking the, whatever it is, $106,000 operations manual and effectively making it a part of board policy. That's problem number one. May I finish this part? Problem number two is, did I say something funny?
Yes, you said something hilarious.
I was just going to say that I disagree with you, but I'll wait until you're completely done. It does not override board policy, it does not usurp board policy, it refers to board policy and supplements board policy.
All right. A year ago in August, by a prior resolution, and I have it here with me, we also, in your bullet point 3 at the bottom, superseded all of these other policies. So, just as the same situation we had with the check signing last month, where there is no significant or appreciable change, I don't understand why this needs to be done. I don't understand why you would again, since this was approved a year ago, supersede these other resolutions. That doesn't make any sense.
Where do you see this supersedes?
Look at bullet 3.
Bullet 3 where?
Bullet 3 on the
Which page?
resolution.
Because it's a new resolution. So this resolution takes the place of the previous resolution.
Well, the appropriate business-like method of doing it, were that the intent, would be to say that this supersedes the one from a year ago.
Okay.
So, but still, I am concerned at what is called the District Operations Manual, and the inconsistency of policy numbers. I don't see how this in any way relates to board policy. And now, after all this time, a year, we finally have this. I'll have a look at it and see what I think about it. But until I have the opportunity to see it, I'm not comfortable with this wording, and the wording doesn't make sense.
All right, any more questions? Or
Yes.
do you want to address those?
Well, I just would like to point back to this particular slide. This investment policy starts with the ORS and then moves to what is our board policy? And is our board policy more restrictive, less restrictive? And then this investment policy provides some of the specifics that are in the ORS, as well as basically follows along with what the board policy says, which is that the general manager or designee is the investment officer, that the investment officer has to adhere to the rules of the ORS and the investment policy, and talks about the diversification of investments and the rate of return that is expected. So this policy has no conflicts with the board policy. It simply provides a lot more of the meat.
Okay, I guess I didn't make myself clear. We have resolution, what was here from last year?
For
Resolution.
2012.
That exists, right?
Yes,
You
it
agree?
does.
Okay. Resolutions 296, 10202, 08208, 12208, and 4/2012. No, is this one 4/2012?
Last year's was, this one is
So
022013.
That's the only one that exists. You can't wipe out something that's already been superseded.
Now, when this one is approved, if this one is approved, it will supersede all of the others. 042012 is the active
Which pretty
resolution.
much supersedes.
And it will be
ones.
superseded by 022013 should it be approved by the board.
Yes, but my point is, we already, a year ago,
So who
superseded.
cares? Okay, so it's already superseded by having 042012 in effect. Who cares, Pat? Who cares?
I care about the wording of our resolutions.
Okay, so do you want to strike what's in here besides 042012? Then just say so.
Well, until, and had I been provided with a red line, that would have helped. Until I have a chance to review this, I'm not gonna
Okay, well then let's move on then. Commissioner?
I have a question while we have this disc in front of us. It's just identified as CRW final policies. Are these the final policies from the operations manual? I mean, it's not board policies, we know that.
No, it's not board policy.
I just
The
want to have
board
it
has
identified.
broken out and has directed the general manager to have operational policies that are separate from board policy. The board policies that we're talking about, and the reason why you heard my reaction, is that my contract references board policies revisions 11207. And that's what this is that you heard Ms. Bright quoting from on page 4, which says that the general manager is the investment officer, the general manager or his designee is the investment officer.
I understand that.
And what this is, I'm sorry, what this is at the last board meeting, because the policies were finally completed toward the end of last fiscal year, Mr.
Now, you mean your
Sterling.
operation?
Yeah, the operations
manual
policies. Mr. Sterling and Ms. Holloway asked for an electronic copy of those so that they could review them. That's what those are.
It's a portion of what will be the operations manual,
Right.
not the whole operations manual,
That is
but
correct.
that portion of it.
It's the portion that has been completed to date.
Okay, thank you.
So here's my concern. One of them. In the past, before August last year, when this amazing document was brought to us, the board resolution specifically had attached to it and designated and approved the investment policy. One of my objections last year, which is a continuing objection this year, is that this document, which is attached, is, by the general manager's very forthright statement, under the control of and subject to the change by the general manager. Now, if we have, as we had in the past, an investment policy that is the board investment policy that's attached to a resolution, that's fine. But this is a document by virtue of all the stuff that is not in the control of the board. It says here, approval and revision dates, Lee E. Moore Senior, point of contact, Carol Bright. There's nothing about the board in here at all, and it's the board's investment policy. It is not staff investment policy.
All right, well, that's why it's before us. We have a resolution to approve it.
Well, quite frankly.
So the board does have involvement in adopting the policy. So do you want to adopt it or do you not want to?
Quite frankly, under statute and under our policy, the board does not have to approve it. The reason that Ms. Bright is bringing it before you is because it is a best practices document.
Prior to this guy, the investment policy was always specifically approved by, and it is under the control of the board.
Can you please show me that in the policies package?
And the board, in this particular case, has designated the general manager as the investment officer. The board has not passed off investment policy to staff. That still remains with the
Could
board.
you please show me in the policy where it says that we have to bring this policy before the board every year?
You show me where I'm wrong.
It's
I don't
signed.
have to show you anything.
We're
Well,
making
that's
the
obvious.
allegation.
No,
No, you are.
No,
You've
it's a
made the-
board- it's a-
Yes, you've made the assertion.
Tammy.
You've made the assertion, so back it up.
I've made the assertion
Back
that
it up.
every year in the past.
Point it out.
Be
Where is
quiet.
it in the board policy?
Please.
Are you telling me to be quiet because you can't prove your point?
Good afternoon, Board of Policy, please.
Can I insert something here, just briefly? The investment policy doesn't have a lot of leeway. The ORS is very clear about the nature of the investments, the time frame of investments. If staff or the board chose to do something that was outside of that, it would have to go to the Oregon Short-Term Investment Board for their approval of our policy. Because our policy is at least as tight and stringent as the ORS, you don't have to take it to the Short-Term Investment Board. So while there may be some debate as to whether we call this an operations policy or not, we felt, since staff, including the general manager, was functionally operating the investments, it would be good to include it in the operations manual. But there's not really a lot of leeway as far as changing the language, changing the things that we can invest in, or anything else. We have to be at least as stringent as the state, or should the board want us to do something which most people would say would be riskier investments to get a better return, we would have to get approval by the state before we could do any of those things, before we could take any of those actions.
Well, and I also understand that the powers of this board can make any type of change they want to. So if the board wants to take on that responsibility, they can make that motion, they can do that. What I don't like are these allegations and these assertions that staff or the general manager is doing something outside of their powers or duties.
I didn't
And that
say
this
that.
board has no power or control over it, which
I
is
didn't
not
say
true.
that either. It's definitely not true. I agree
Okay, have
with
you
you
found it?
100%.
Have you found your,
The investment policy is established by the board policy. It's right here.
okay, can you read it
And-
for us, please?
Just one second.
On page 4.
It's 3.6.
3.6 is on page 4. I've got it open in front of me.
Investment objectives, investment of funds. CRW maintains a policy of investing a maximum of surplus available funds as is reasonably prudent, while having available cash on hand to meet daily operating needs. 1, the general manager or designee is the investment officer. 2, the investment officer shall adhere to the rules set forth in Oregon Revised Statutes 294.035 and 294.040 and the CRW investment policy. So what I am saying is that until last year, the CRW investment policy was approved, and you weren't here perhaps, Commissioner, so you may not be aware.
I was here last year.
No, I know you were here last year, but previous to this one, the one in August last year, investment policy was approved by the board
No, you
and
said
attached, may I finish, attached to the resolution. And right now, so far as I can see, by the action of the board a year ago,
We have it, it's
it
attached
has
to the
been,
resolution.
it has been done. It doesn't need to be done again. I've expressed my concern, and, you know, that's all I'm gonna say. I've said.
You're talking in circles because
No,
you
I'm
haven't
not.
proved your point. So we're moving on. Do I have a motion to approve the resolution or no? Because if I don't, then I'm going to move on. Commissioner Sterling? Commissioner Kemper?
I'll make the motion. I move to adopt Resolution 02-2013, adopting the Clackamas River Water Investment Policy, effective date September 13th, 2012.
I second the motion. Any further discussion?
Well, yeah, actually, just to educate you a bit, Commissioner, previously, historically, the document that was replaced, the investment policy shall be approved by the board. Okay, so the board
Okay,
has
and
already
what does that
had,
resolution say, Pat? What is the number on that resolution?
this has been supplanted.
Exactly.
I
It's
agree,
been-
I agree,
Okay,
but
so
I'm.
it is
but-
no longer in effect.
I'm asking the board to approve the investment policy, that's what we're here for. And yes, Commissioner Holloway, I understand that we did this last year. Best practices suggest that I come to the board every year, provide a little bit of information about perhaps what the market is doing, talk about any changes that may or may not have happened.
That's all fine.
I am doing my job.
Yeah, that is all fine. I'm just saying that I, as a commissioner, voted against it last year. I will not support it this year because the document that backs it up is a document that is not in control of the board.
you can make any changes to that document by a motion, Pat. You have the document, you have the policy, the investment policy in front of you. So don't act like a little 3-year-old that says that they have no say in anything. Because you do, as a board member and as a commissioner, with that policy in front of you, if there's something in there you do not like, you can, by board action, make those changes.
All right, then,
But you would
Commissioner,
prefer-
I would be, as long as its oddities are corrected, I would be willing to accept it so long as it is removed from the operations manual and simply becomes the board investment policy. Is that clear enough?
Does it matter?
Yes.
Why does it matter?
It's the responsibility of the Board of Commissioners.
You can still have that same responsibility, Commissioner Sterling.
Okay, all
We
this
do not have-
three-year-olds, let's go ahead and vote.
We do
Okay,
not have
Cahill, can you call for the
responsibility.
vote so we can move on?
We do not have responsibility of day-to-day operations.
Nor are we qualified.
Adora, can you please call the
I don't
vote?
believe you have a second.
Yeah,
Oh, I
there is a
think-
second.
Yeah.
Barbara did.
Any second?
Commissioner Holloway,
No.
Commissioner Kemper,
Yes.
Commissioner Sterling,
No.
and Commissioner Kehoe.
Yes.
Motion fails 2-2.
Lastly, I tried to interject there, Carol. On page 8, it refers again to internal controls. And numerous times throughout these meetings, I have requested, I know Commissioner Holloway has requested, could you produce those internal controls in a nice big fat document with all this color and stuff, so that we have a copy of your internal controls?
The internal control policy was also presented to the board last year in August. And and it is on the disc and in the book, you know,
We have
I
a
don't-
process and procedure, Commissioner Sterling. If you want something on the agenda, you need to request it to the secretary.
you do have access to the internal control policy, and I would be happy to answer any questions about that. Maybe at the next meeting, we can discuss that policy.
So where specifically, if you bear with me, are the internal controls that are referred to on page 8, 3.10, internal controls?
There is a separate internal controls policy, operational policy, that talks about safeguarding of district's assets and specifically how staff is expected to behave.
My simple
with
question
regards
is,
to that.
you said that I can access, where can I access that?
It's on the
at?
disc that you were just handed. It's in the book that you have sitting on the corner of your desk. And
Okay.
a copy of it was provided to you last year in August.
Well, I apologize if I received it and didn't review it.
It was part of the August meeting when we talked about the investment policy last year.
And it's also part of the audit because the auditors reviewed them and advised the board that they were adequate based upon.
Is that Moss Adams you're referring to?
Yes.
Commissioner
Thank you,
Holloway?
Carol.
You're welcome.
Actually, sorry to have to correct you, Commissioner Sterling,
Oh.
but what was requested in the last meeting was not the policy, because I know we all got the policy. What I am concerned about are the actual internal procedures that are safeguarding the financial operations. And that is not policy. Policy is great. Policy says, we will do it all right. What I asked for very specifically was, what exactly do you have in place that creates those safeguards? How are you complying with policy? That is my question, and it's still outstanding.
That is probably a little bit of a longer discussion than we perhaps want to have this evening, but I would certainly be happy to engage in that conversation. And, you know, significantly, internal controls have a lot of different aspects, and we're a pretty small entity, so, you know, one of the best things you can do is separation of duties. And we do that. I have,
Yeah. Carol,
Okay, I
I'm sorry to
understand all that.
interrupt you, but it's not on the agenda, and I'm not going to get into a long discussion about it. The commissioners know the process to put something on the agenda. So I am moving on to item number 3.
No, Kenny, it is old business.
Well, I take
No,
that back
and-
because you're doing the same thing again and again. You're not producing the internal controls, you're just
Okay.
doing the policy, and I read that in August.
Mr.
That
Sterling,
was not-
one of the problems
Internal
is,
controls.
one of the problems that makes it difficult to, say, turn to page 13 and there's an internal control. Internal controls are compensated and they're layered. And so you're gonna look in that manual and you're gonna see in various sections throughout the manual, compensating controls.
Yeah, and I
So-
suggest that we not get into a discussion. They have the discs, they can review it. If they have questions later, review the material you have first.
Commissioner, I have reviewed it, and what I
No,
want
you
to
have
know,
not
no.
reviewed this.
I have
You just-
reviewed the internal controls
No.
policy, it was given to us a long time ago.
I
What
thought you
I
said you
want
didn't have
very
it.
specifically is, how do you
Okay,
separate
we're not having that
accounts
discussion.
receivable from
No,
accounts
and we're
payable,
not. We're
et
going-
cetera?
we're
That's
going to
what
agenda
I want.
item
And
three.
any sensible business person would understand what I'm talking
can
about.
ask-
Can I
put
say-
that on the
I will-
agenda.
I will say one comment.
And I want it in
believe-
writing.
I believe that we just said that. When you look at that disc with the policies, there are policies in there about accounts payable, about accounts receivable. The internal controls within those things are
Carol,
discussed
she's
in
not
those
gonna be happy
policies.
with any answer. I'm moving on to agenda item number 3.
I don't want policy, I want to
You
know
can say anything
who's
you want.
doing
We're
what
going to
and
agenda
what are the
item number
safeguards
3.
between them. It's
Okay.
very uncomplicated.
So we have a debt covenant update, please?
Yes,
Thank you.
absolutely. Annually, we are required to provide information to the board regarding our revenue bond covenants. So that is what I'm here to do this evening. So it is a requirement within 90 days of the end of the fiscal year. The requirement in the bond covenants is that our stabilized net revenue has to be at least 125% of the annual debt service. And that our net revenue less SDCs has to be at least 100% of the annual debt service. These covenants are put into the bond document to provide assurances to the bond holders that we will not default on bonds, that we will be able to make our payments, and that they will earn their return.
I have a question for you. The difference between stabilized net revenue and net revenue?
That's the language that's used. This was a comment that came up, I believe, last year as well, and I did talk with our bonding agents. And the only difference between those two items is taking out the SDCs. The second one could be actually called stabilized net revenue less SDCs.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
so these numbers have been updated. We still are not completely done with our financial adjustments, but we're really, really close. So these numbers are not likely to change very much. So I'm showing the gross revenues, which are made up of those components below. So this 46,405 is the interest earnings, is all of these numbers. The miscellaneous income is in the general fund. That includes the rent that we receive on this building and the rent that we get from BCT, as well as other items. And of course, you know, the water rate revenue and service connection fee, we know what that is. System development charges, this number down here does not include the SDC interest, that's the 17,000. So those are all the gross revenues that we can use for the calculation. And here's our operating expense. I've got this broken out by department. We do have our overhead equipment and labor from the capitalized stuff for our CIP. These numbers do not include capital outlay. Capital outlay does not get included in our operating expenses. And then our debt service payment for the year, $645,260. In our budget, the current budget year that we're in, we budgeted $1 million to be used to ensure that we meet our debt covenants for this year. That is where we could take that money within the first 90 days of this year, do the transfer. It will cover us on our debt covenants for last year. So calculation number one, we take our revenue minus the operating expense plus the rate stabilization and divide that by the debt service payment. And using that $1 million, we come up with a 2.06. This is the number that needs to be at least 1.25. And with the $1 million, we come up with 2.06. When we use less the SDCs, you can see that the revenue number is different, the operating expense number is the same, and with that number, we come to the 1.9. This is the number that needs to be at least a 1.0. So in both cases, we exceeded the requirement by using the $1 million in the rate stabilization. So we've exceeded the debt covenant requirements. These are unaudited numbers. There could be some other minor changes before we're completely done. But if the numbers don't change significantly, we actually need less than 500,000 instead of $1 million. Now, we have transferred the $1 million, and as soon as we have audited financials, we will transfer what we don't need back to the rate stabilization account, which will keep that much larger balance in our reserve.
A
That's a
couple
good
questions.
surprise.
What would our ratio have been without the $1 million?
Well, it's on page,
Well, I actually didn't calculate it without the $1 million. I calculated what we needed, which I think I came up with about, right now, 480,000. And with 480,000, we would be at 1.25 and 1.09.
So obviously without the transfer.
We would not have made it.
Now,
when you can do the calculation on that page and just take out the $1 million.
Year after year, you told Commissioner Holloway that she didn't know what she was talking about. Year after year, I sat here and listened to her take and warn the ratepayers, the Board of Commissioners, the entire staff, that we weren't meeting the rates. Here it is in Standard & Poor's. It testifies as to the authenticity of Commissioner Holloway's hard, diligent work. Her diligent work for the protection of the CRW ratepayers and its employees.
Commissioner Sterling, you know how many government agencies
Oh,
don't make their
that's
debt
fine. I'm not
covenants?
interested.
No,
Ju-
do you know
I'm just
how
a
many?
3-year-old, and let's
Do
just
you?
continue on.
Do you know how many?
But
And you know
we
what,
also
there
know-
aren't any sanctions either.
we also know
So
two
it's
wrongs
not-
make a right.
It's not this huge, big conspiracy that she tries to make it out to be, besides the fact we hadn't raised rates in a number of years.
And why
which
is that?
we
Why
had
is that,
a
Kehoe?
lower-
Why is
lower
that, despite
Standard
it
Poor
being
rating?
stated specifically in the board policies, each and every year, it's the responsibility of the Board of Commissioners to look at the rates and to find out what the real
Then why
numbers
did you
are.
vote for a rate study at the last meeting? You're
a
the
whole
ones who
separate
did
issue.
vote for it, and you also voted for a rate increase.
Well, I voted for a rate
So,
increase of
you can go ahead and
14.25%.
sit on
I didn't
your high
authorize the
school-
fraudulent increase of 47 some odd, or 42.75.
Well, you
I
did.
readily admit, as Cardwell said on his way out the door, you were snookered.
Well, you know, then I guess.
And that
you
brings up
did.
the other issue. Who gave you permission to print that in the paper or in the flyer to the ratepayers? Who told you to do that?
What is it?
The adios to Cardwell, and it appears that you're giving the endorsement to the 190.
No, it doesn't. I mean, that's your interpretation.
Well, I got
You
ratepayers
mean to tell
calling
me
me up
that
and
as a
saying
general
that same
manager,
thing.
I can't wish Commissioner Cardwell well after 12
So
years
you're
of service?
accepting responsibility for publishing those 2 articles in
Yes,
the
I
flyer?
am. Yes, I am.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure you didn't have permission from the Board of
I don't
Commissioners to
need
do that.
permission from the board to put it in there,
He
Mrs.
doesn't
Sterling.
need my permission.
Commissioner Sterling, I think you're inappropriately challenging our general manager. in
You know,
public meetings.
Commissioner
If you have-
Kemper,
If you have concerns
It's fine.
about that,
If he
it must be
has
done.
concerns about my challenges, we live in America in a free state with a judicial system that can take care of it. He's welcome to sue me. File the paperwork. Let's get the subpoena started. Let's unredact all these invoices and find out where the money is going.
So we could yet again charge the ratepayer for all these legal fees. Makes absolutely no
Well,
sense.
these legal fees are directly related to you,
No,
as
they're not.
proved from October 11th, 2011, in your statement in executive session that 3 times you and the other commissioners have fraudulently and maliciously filed charges and bully and everything else against Commissioner Holloway.
That's what I said?
Yes, play the thing back unless you redacted it and erased it, what you gave to the district attorney's office.
He said we
Mr.
fraudulently filed
Sterling,
charges.
you're being totally outrageous. I resent, you haven't proved a word that you said. We have an independent study that basically said that Commissioner Holloway is guilty of malfeasance. Those are not my words.
You've read it, Pat.
I
The Jackson report.
I do have to say something, Bill.
Let me say it.
All right,
Leachman's
let's-
report that she just filed clearly states that there was no medical information and no employees' names listed in any of those documents
what
that
it
you
says.
referred to. That's what this attorney Leachman stated in her report.
Well, the document speaks for itself. If you want to rewrite history, that's fine.
Well,
If you want to rewrite documents, that's
So are
fine.
we voting on anything in regards
It
to the
has
debt
nothing to do with
covenant?
what we're
It's
talking
just an
about
update as to where we stand.
Simply an
And
update. I have options of how I can present this information to the board. I could have mailed the letter to you rather than presenting it, but I just feel that this is something that needs to be out to the public so that we know where we are.
well,
I
I
think
would,
it's great news about the extra 500,000.
It's not extra money.
To put it back into the rate stabilization
Right, so
fund.
that will be saved in our reserves.
That's excellent.
And we had
I have-
forecast that at about 750, but it's actually 250,000 less. When we did the budget, we had projected about 750.
Okay.
hello?
Commissioner Holloway?
Yeah. Refresh me, Ms. Bright. We're moving money from the rate stabilization fund to the general fund.
It was already moved.
Yes, that's correct.
Commissioner, may I continue my conversation with Ms. Bright, or are you planning on having it for me?
Go ahead.
And does that not take a resolution of the board?
No, that was budgeted dollars. We just executed the budget.
Well, I understand that, but to move money between the separate funds, I believe we need a board resolution.
No, it was budgeted. It was part of the budget resolution.
Well, I know that the rate stabilization fund was established. That was part of the budget, and that was approved. I absolutely
Yes.
agree. But to make a move from the rate stabilization fund to the general fund, just as we had to last year make a move between, whatever it was, something into general fund to cover excess personnel costs.
Right.
So that does not require a board resolution?
No, it doesn't. What I came to the board with last year to move money from materials and services to personnel services, that was in addition to the budget. That was making a change to the budgeted dollars. What we did this year with transferring the $1 million from rate stabilization to the general fund was what the adopted budget told us to do. So we have other transfers. We have a transfer in the general fund, from the general fund to the capital reserve fund. So that's that money that we're putting aside into like the savings account to be able to use for our capital projects in the future.
I do understand what that is.
When that's budgeted, we don't come back to the board and say, okay, we're gonna do it now. The budget says, do this, and we do.
But the budget puts it into a fund. I understand the purpose of the rate stabilization fund, and I understand that it's completely appropriate, but it was my understanding that to officially make that move requires a board resolution.
No, the budget resolution in and of itself stated that we budgeted $1 million transfer from rate stabilization to the general fund. So whenever those are in the budget, included in the budget, that is our instruction from the board as the responsible party that adopts the budget. That is our instruction to do so.
Okay, I'm not arguing with you, I'm just checking.
Okay, we're gonna move to item number 4, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
So here, some additional informational items. These are our financial reports. So here's our accounts receivable aging. As you know, we bill in August, so this includes the August billing. And it's because we had warmer weather, so we had some kind of different usage than we were used to the last couple of years, as well as the rate increase. the ending balance in August is nearly $553 greater than it was in June at that time. Of course, we go back 2 months, June was right after the bills. But if you also look at it compared with a year ago, nearly $270,000 greater, and we actually sold, our consumption was up by 53,000 CCFs. Now, I can't really tell you exactly how that calculates out, because it could have been one or two, customers using a whole lot of that, and so because of the rates, there's not an exact dollar that's associated with the consumption versus the rate increase. But, so we had a pretty decent August, and it was primarily due to the warmer weather that we had this year.
That's great. Is that why we're able to do perhaps the transfer back into the rate stabilization fund?
No,
Or
because that is based on meeting those debt covenants as of June 30th.
Oh,
So,
okay.
But
So-
it certainly, as we move forward, that will certainly help us with regards to not needing rate stabilization money this year.
Ms. Burke, let me just go back to my question, please. When we moved money from materials and services to personnel services, that was a movement within the general fund.
Yeah, that's
And
correct.
those monies had been appropriated in the general fund.
They had been appropriated by those categories, though, by personal
You can
services and
change
materials.
the categories, you
Yes.
just can't change the monetary amount.
So, since that was a category within the general fund, and it was a specific appropriation,
Mhm.
and the, actually, I'm looking at this year's, yeah, but I don't think the theory is any different. And the rate stabilization fund was established, last year it was 600 and something, I thought.
Correct.
So, and we had a resolution, as I recall, that made that transfer last year. Actually, I think it
No,
occurred in the
no.
beginning of this year, because we had to buy into this year's money.
The only resolution was the budget appropriation. We budgeted last year a transfer from rate stabilization to the general fund of $697,879. And we made that transfer within the first 90 days. So those funds for the debt covenants. When we finished our audit, we realized that we didn't need all of that, we only needed 644. So we moved 53,879 back to rate stabilization. So when you look at our financials this year, you'll see, in fact, you should be able to see it on these pages that we're getting ready to come up to. You can see that we were under budget in the rate stabilization fund by the 53,879. That's on page 1 of 5 in the agenda item 4C. So when we make those transfers that are budgeted, and we have others, we budget SDC money to go to the revenue bond fund to make the debt service payments, we budget SDC money to go to the CIP, we just make those transfers because the appropriation resolution that the board adopts gives us that authorization to do that. Now, we can't do more than what's appropriated without coming to the board, but as long as we stay within the appropriation, we use that resolution from the budget adoption as our guiding document. Okay, so here is our cash and investment position, comparing July 31st with August 31st. And we have not posted LGIP earnings for August yet. And in the financial reports, I wanted to bring something to the board's attention. I believe it was Commissioner Holloway that had asked if we could provide a little bit more granular information. So again, if you look at page 1 of 5 on agenda item 4C, you'll see that instead of just requirements of the lump sum, we have broken that out into the appropriated categories. So we have personnel services, materials and services, and capital outlay. So if you go further on into page 4 of 5 and add up all the personal services, it will equal that number.
Thank you for that. That actually wasn't what I was talking about though. What I was talking about is having those split out within the various divisions.
They are on page 4 of 5.
On page which? 4 or 5?
4 of 5, they've always been split out like that.
No, I obviously didn't make myself clear. What I was trying to get was all of, personnel services. Let's see, budget. Well, so you have to remove that. On page 4C, that's the total for all departments.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
I thought that's what you.
That's
were
why, that
requesting.
is what I asked for,
Okay,
thank you very much.
So, this month I am again presenting to you June, because when we get to the end of the year with the accruals and everything else, we didn't cut accounts payable off till the middle of August. So we're continuing to work on last fiscal year. Next month, I will give you July and August as kind of separate columns so that you can see what's been going on. And if you recall, I did this last year as well. I kind of gave you June 2 months in a row because the numbers changed a little bit. What I've done here, I don't know if you have the presentation from last month or if you want to compare it later, but I have put the numbers in red, what changed a little bit. And so our revenue is up a little bit. We added an additional 55,000. What we do annually is we do an estimate of how much water could have been used between the meter reads and the end of June. And so what we did this year was reverse the number that we put in last year and then put in a new estimate, and that increased our revenues by about 55,000. Again, because we had warmer weather, we had more usage, and we had the rate increase. We also received $30,084 on the carbon study. Now, if you look at the financials, it looks like our revenue on the carbon study is way down, but in fact, if we look at the overall picture, we estimated that we would receive about $270,000 from the Water Research Foundation. We have to date received about $240,000, and we expect another $30,000 this fiscal year, and that's in the budget. What happened is when we were doing the budget a year ago for 2012, we put the revenue in the 2012 budget, and we received much of that revenue in 2011. And so so you look at that big number and say, we didn't get our money, but we did, we just got it in the previous year. So those are the changes basically in the revenue. The water revenue, again, we ended up coming in at 97.19% of our estimate, so that's better than we have. And again, part of that is weather. So if we look at general fund expenditures, again, I've put in red all the things that I changed from last month when I shared this with you. General fund expenditures came in at about $545,000 under the budget. So we had a reduction of about not quite 14,000. Personnel services is down a little bit, and materials and services is up a little bit. The personal services is down because, again, for our financial reporting every year, we have to do an accrual of our outstanding leave balances. And we had anticipated a retirement last year when we did that accrual, so we accrued the full balance for an individual. And as we move forward this year, we didn't have to do that, so that we had such a big chunk last year, we were able to reduce it. Capital outlay hasn't changed and probably will not. So if we look at our CIP expenditures, the personal services actually went down a little bit. We had a couple of projects or a couple of things that had been recorded to CIP that didn't really qualify as CIP, so we had to move those back to the general fund. And materials and services with the accruals, that number has gone up a little bit. So here's our comparison from this June and last June. And then we move to item so we had 2 payrolls in August. And our net accounts payable for August was $432,207.38.
Ready for a motion?
I am.
I move to acknowledge payroll in the gross amount of $202,569.68, and acknowledge net accounts paid of $432,207.38 for the month of August 2012.
I second the motion.
Commissioner Hallway?
In going through the accounts payable, I see that we have, in June, $30,000 to legal counsel Phillips, and in July, another roughly $12,000. Do we believe that we have completed the 2012 wrap-up of costs with that $30,000?
Yes, that June was included in 2012.
But are you confident that we now have collected all of the legal bills through the end of June?
I would say pretty confident, since we did cut off accounts payable around August 20th, so anything that came in after would require some additional scrutiny. Is it worth reopening to do an accrual? And so far, we've seen 2 or 3 items where we're getting late bills, but they're only a few $100s and they're not related to legal.
Okay, so these numbers, as of this August 31 period, wraps up last year, right?
Yes, I would say that a significant amount of the stuff on the August check register is this current fiscal year, not last fiscal year. But if you see in the description, if it says June, then we included that.
Okay, that's why I was querying, because that was a very good thing. And can you tell me for what purpose we paid Mr. Day $10,000?
He was doing some additional computer work. I don't have the invoice in front of me, so.
Mr. Moore?
Actually, it's bifurcated. One part of it was for systems analyst support in the IT department.
I'm sorry, could you speak up, please?
I said I think there's 2 entries there for Mr. Day, and one of it is systems analyst work for the computer department and the IT department, because we were still working on our servers and the like. And then the other one was wrapping up the work for Ms. Thompson. I think that's his final bill.
Okay. And just since I didn't get a chance to finish this topic when you raised it, you have stated that, quote, there is an official report that finds me guilty of official misconduct. And I'm asking.
If I use the word guilty, that's a misstatement. It concluded that you had engaged in misconduct.
And you are referring to Ms. Leachman's investigative report, is that correct? And Mr. Moore and Ms. Kehoe and Ms. Kemper, are you all standing behind the statements that Ms. Leachman attributed to you in that report? Yes, no?
Statements that she attributed to us?
I don't think there were any statements.
Did she make quotes? I didn't.
No, I
She
didn't see any quotes.
I haven't looked at it for a month.
She reported.
I have no problem with it.
She reported information from you. So Mr. Moore, Ms. Kehoe, and Ms. Kemper are prepared under penalty of perjury to support Ms. Leachman's statements.
Are we in a courtroom, Pat?
Well, I'm just
Have
asking.
I-
Mr. Moore, no.
Penalty of perjury? Are you
Mr.
serious?
Mr. Moore just stated that an official report,
More.
quote,
Are these more threats, Grafton, like your
Tammy,
complaint to the
excuse me.
sheriff's office?
It's promise.
Tammy, you're not
That
going,
went
you are not,
nowhere?
It's a promise.
you're not
Okay.
going to distract me from my question by interrupting. So, Mr. Moore, you are saying
That
in
is
your
not an agenda topic.
capacity.
It's not an agenda topic, Pat, and I'm not gonna.
Pat,
Well,
if
okay,
you-
so,
Pat,
but you
Pat,
just,
if you-
excuse me,
if you would
excuse
like
me,
this
excuse
board-
me,
No,
point of order,
no, if you would
point
like
of order.
this board to pay your legal expenses in regards to that bully complaint, then you need to make that request. We can have that discussion at that time. You
I-
can make it
okay,
official, it
no.
can be on the record on whether or not you want the ratepayers to cover you in Grafton. You guys can make that request.
Well,
So, no,
Leachman already
ma'am.
cleared me. She said there was no out of
Leachman does
scope.
not make the decision on whether or not you receive legal coverage, Mr. Sterling.
But apparently, according to Mr. Moore, Ms. Leachman can officially establish that I committed official misconduct. That's what he just said. That's what I'm confirming.
You know, Pat,
That's what he said.
Pat, if you would like this board to consider
It has,
whether or not.
it has nothing to do
we-
with that. It has
No,
nothing
it
to do with
does.
that.
It does, because this
Okay.
board directed Ms. Leachman to do an investigation.
And how many
So if
conversations did you have with
if
her
you-
before she was hired?
If you would like us to consider coverage for you, you need to make that request.
I'm
I'll
not
make it
talking
right
about
now.
that.
I move that the CRW Board of Commissioners authorize payment of Commissioner Patricia Holloway's legal defense costs in connection with the Oregon Bureau of Labor and Industries complaint number STEMWB 120306-10308 for the attorney of Commissioner Holloway's choice. Here, a second. You can second your own motion.
She's got a conflict.
No, I.
An actual
Yeah.
conflict.
I have an actual.
Well, we don't have a second, so let's move on.
Okay, well, no, I will make the same
We
motion
actually already
for-
have, we actually have a motion on the table right now that we need to vote on.
No.
Commissioner Kemper?
What are we voting on now?
You're voting on acknowledgement of payroll and accounts paid.
That's what we- Yes.
Commissioner Sterling?
No?
Commissioner Kehoe?
Yes.
Motion fails 2-2.
Okay, moving on to agenda item number 5.
I was going to make a motion for Commissioner.
Well, you're gonna have to wait because we're moving on to agenda item number
Well,
5.
there is something we do need to get cleared up in the interim.
We're moving on to
Okay.
agenda item number 5.
Mr. Moore, why on the CRW website, in connection with the Leachman report, have you listed 11 pages of employee names on discipline issues and medical records? If you'd like to see a copy of it, it's right here.
11 names of employees.
11 pages where you have placed employee names in connection with medical issues and discipline issues. And they are out there on the CRW website, placed there by your authorization.
Not to my knowledge.
Well, come get a copy. It's right here.
You can go ahead and proceed, Adam.
Thank you. Agenda item 5, it's been a while since we talked about the generator, and wanted to take the opportunity to get an update on the project, where we're at, status-wise, and design. Talk about budget a little bit, where we're at there, so appreciate the opportunity to do that tonight. Just a quick outline of what I'll be speaking on, quick review of project scope, looking at our original budgetary estimates, the status of the design phase right now. I'm looking at some specific components of the design, mainly the switch gear associated with the generator, and I'll explain more of that soon. Comparing some of our early versus more current cost, estimated costs, and looking at why some of those costs have increased, and other potential future budget needs, and we'll have some discussion on that. So. The project scope is, as you all know, installing the generator at the treatment plant, doing a number of electrical upgrades on the treatment plant, replacing a lot of that vintage main electrical equipment out there at the plant. Big focus on improving health and safety and reliability aspects at the plant with the electrical, and also participating in PGE's program, which we're under agreement with PGE right now. So, back in 2010, 2011, kind of engineering sort of set the stage for preliminary design, and we visited some of the older work that had been done back when the project was first brought into fruition. And that's how we came to the recommendations of establishing the project as it sits today. The estimates that we developed and worked into the last 2 years of the last 2 fiscal years of adopted budgets were based in great part on the Cundiff study. They included costs for, of course, construction, engineering, some other costs, and then combined that, or staff combined that with CRW in-house and indirect costs. Normally, like we do for our CIP processes, we review in the budget cycle this year. The construction costs in the Cundiff report were based on industry standards, best practices, and some direct vendor quotations, namely one specific vendor who furnished the generator. We were able to obtain quotes at that time for some of the major components of the generator system, like the enclosure. And also included costs for, and again, I'm going back to this one main item, the switchgear. And the switchgear, and I'll get to a few pictures in a sec. The switchgear, what it basically does is it's kind of the mainframe computer, for lack of a better phrase, for the generator. What it does is it regulates and monitors the power from the generator system to the plant. So without the switchgear, you can't connect it to it. It's composed of controls and a lot of breakers, circuit breakers, that are tied to specific pieces of the plant. Namely, in our case, it's our pumps, both high lift and low lift. The budgetary estimates, like I said, in May.
I'm sorry, can I just interrupt? So it's, you said principally the high lift and low lift.
Mm-hmm.
What other components? I know stuff goes on once kept there.
Right, there's a main, besides the pumps, there are a couple of main panels that feed the smaller energy-using fixtures in the plant.
Okay, so
the pumps and mixers and the backwash pumps, the filter system. It's essentially just a way of looking at the overall electrical needs of the plant at one point, and that's the point of distribution.
So is it fair to say that it's simply the power goes into our system and replaces what would be the online power operating on the system?
Yes, yes. And with you might remember the phrase paralleling switchgear, which is a key piece of the PGE and CRW shared component of the generator, where line power kicks off because of an emergency. The generator kicks on, the switchgear switches over to the generator system, the generator operates the plant. And then, of course, there's the other aspect of, if it's possible, PGE pulls power onto their grid if we are not using that for whatever reason. So in May of 2011, we presented that overall $3.2 million figure again, and I can't believe what that was composed of. And again, the last two, because it is a multi-year project, the last 2 fiscal years, it is shown in there that overall project cost. And again, just to review, those costs include design, construction, in-house, overhead and labor, other indirect costs like permitting and surveying and contingency. So again, very common with our CIP budgeting process. Jumping ahead, where we are today in project design, as you know, we're working with Oregon Electric. We hired them as a construction manager, general contractor, in DC to take advantage of their experience in the emergency generator construction industry in the design phase. and work with them. And we also have Cundiff Engineering, who is our electrical engineer, so to speak, to assist us in reviewing and assisting with that design process. So it's a very cooperative process. In August of this year, we finalized the selection of some critical system components, and again, mainly having to do with the switchgear for the contractor's design. And the key part of this is that, if you recall, a couple months ago, we did an early work amendment to authorize the contractor to do some pre-submittal work to basically get, once we approved equipment, get it into the queue so that the manufacturer can start the manufacturing process, because the switchgear piece of this project is about a 20-week lead time, about 5 months. So the sooner we got it in the queue, the better. So we finalized selection of some components and breaking the components out into 4 main categories. We can consider the base switchgear, and then items more directly related to safety, reliability, items that if we put in now will assist us in the future when we may upgrade to, in the short-term future, to other treatment technology like ozone or UV, and then some power control and monitoring items.
Hammond,
Yeah.
could you repeat that one more time?
Sure.
So the dollars being invested look to the future so that when the federal standards for water change, we're in a position to take and adopt them with the additional engineering that we're going to be doing?
There would be additional engineering depending on what technology we chose. The futuristic items are really, should have numbered these, but it's really a small piece of this overall switch gear that I'm going to share with you. It's a small piece of the 4 main categories that I've broken it out into. So pictures. This will help a little bit. So looking at these main categories, and again, bear with me because I didn't include everything here, and we had a fairly comprehensive list of all this electrical equipment that Cundiff helped us compile, and then work with Oregon Electric and share with them. And they said, yeah, we'll get you, we can install these things, and here's what we do. So the base switch gear is this guy here. Essentially, it's a big cabinet, and each of these little sections are breakers. In our case, we have about 9 or 10 of those, like I said, main breakers that feed the plant. Inside the box, if you turn it 90 degrees and look into the side of it, there's the main breakers, and then you go back into the back where the bus bar is, essentially where the main power feeds the breakers, high voltage. There are safety concerns with that, obviously, when you get in, you start working with that stuff. We don't, our policies, we don't work on live equipment, but it is a safety concern if you're in there, you know, in the front end, or if you're in, there are safety issues. So safety-wise, there are barriers you can install, and that's what I'm trying to represent here. There's vertical barriers and horizontal ones that basically compartmentalize each of these little boxes here. Again, very common, easy way to protect against short circuiting. If someone drops a wrench, a rat falls in, and we don't have rats in our plant, though, right, Suzanne? So again, you know, safety.
At least not the 4-footed kind.
Yes. Safety is one of the prime concerns of the project, and we're addressing that issue along with a couple of others from a couple of different standpoints. There is a myriad of options out there. We essentially went down a list and picked ones that we thought would best meet the project goals. You know, you could go over the top and maybe not necessarily, in my opinion, need everything. So we took a lot of time, we sat down with staff, with our consultant, and really came up with a list that we felt would best meet the project goals. A couple of other things. This is basically a fancy computer. It's an arc flash reduction maintenance system, or ARMS. That's another big safety item. And what it does is essentially it tells the circuit breakers to trip faster, to close the circuit or open the circuit faster in the case of a fault. And what that does is it eliminates or really minimizes the risk of an explosive energy release that could harm and possibly really hurt somebody who's working in that area. So there's some control and monitoring, another computer type power expert meter, as it's called. This is kind of, from an engineer's standpoint, really useful in the sense of you're able to monitor power usage. And it's not only a short-term use, but as you look again futuristically, if you're recording and processing the type of power usage that your pumps, that your plant is using, in the future you're going to need that information when you go in and have to design for the new technology, ozone, UV, or kind of the two main ones on the docket for us. So again, just a snapshot of all this equipment, why we're looking at it. So costs. These are estimated costs from the contractor for material cost. It's not included installation. The switch gear, again, that base switch gear, the box, $452,000. The safety items, a couple of which I shared with you, $34,000. Items that have to do with reliability and future benefits, $68,000, and then control and power monitoring components, $24,000. So if we call the whole package the switch gear package, it's just under $600,000. Well, what does that mean for our budgets? What we did then logically was we took the current numbers and compared it with our budgeted numbers and saw some differences. The switchgear base cost increased from this column here, original estimated budget cost, $335,000, increased $117,000. Safety, reliability, control and monitoring were all pretty much across the line increases, and I'm going to explain why that was.
Can I ask you a question? What on this, these switchgear costs do we not have in place right now that perhaps we're adding with our current switchgear?
That's a great question. There's parts of all of these that are new, or better than what we have out there, just because the technology has improved that much in 20, 30, 40 years. Some of our equipment is that old out there. So pieces of the base switch gear, while it may be common 20 or 30 years ago, there are parts of that that are much improved. The codes have changed, the UL listings have changed. The type of enclosure that it's in now is much more protective than it was 40 years ago. These three categories here certainly are essentially new types of technologies if we look at that same time span.
But Adam, right now, we don't have any switchgear in place, correct?
No, we do.
We have, yes, we have our
I mean,
main
our emergency-
motor distribution, essentially our electrical distribution panel inside the plant.
Right.
That bank of panels is our switchgear.
Right. And, well, okay, and we are in the process of upgrading that.
Right.
This is the switchgear though associated with the generator.
It will take the place of the existing.
Okay.
So it's a complete upgrade.
Okay. So we have this, I guess what I'm trying to get clear on, this switchgear is not just replacing the existing switching system. This is also taking the link to the generator.
Sure.
Right,
Yes.
okay, that's what I wanted to
And
show.
it will actually be located by the generator itself. It will be outside of the plant and
That's what I
then
thought.
through conduit connected to the treatment.
And in the upgrade, we are, in a sense, wiring this in to the upgraded system that we're putting into the water treatment plant.
Yes.
Okay.
Commissioner Kemper? has a
It's
question.
been quite a while since we looked at the FEMA generator project. I was thinking that PGE was responsible for some of the switchgear.
They are. That is still the case. I didn't bring in any of that information in this presentation, but there is a separate component that they will be bringing in.
But not all of this.
No, this is all, essentially all our costs. This doesn't include, the overall project cost. We still have to consider that there is PGE credit because they're taking part in the program with us that will come back to us and offset some of the overall project costs. I didn't bring that into this presentation because I really want to get down to the nitty-gritty and why there were cost differences from 2 years ago and now.
Well, that helps that I know that we're adding new things and how technology has evolved, so I can justify the increase in the expense. I do have another question for you.
Sure.
What do you mean by none of the above items include labor or equipment costs?
These are material costs only.
Okay.
So for us to buy it, put it on a shelf, it would cost this much. For us to hire someone to actually install it, put it in the ground, connect it,
So there's other equipment as well, okay.
Yeah, those costs are in our estimates. They're basically a one-to-one. You know, our labor and equipment haven't changed as much as some of these other costs have, which I'll share in a sec. So I didn't include those. So cost increase, obviously, about $243,000 on this switchgear item. Why have they increased? First off, looking at the kind of study 2 years ago, why it was brought about, the big concern at that point was we were looking at the feasibility of the generator connection. That hadn't really been done to the degree that we felt it needed to be up to that point. So the study was conducted to look at the feasibility of connecting a generator, a new generator to an old plant. What was recognized then was there were needs to improve, well, there were the electrical upgrades piece, which we did capture that, but there were also needs inside that to improve life, health, and safety aspects. Those are pieces of a design that typically a preliminary study does not cover. When you're doing preliminary, again, feasibility type studies, you're not looking at specific design, it's getting down to specific equipment and specific costs. So that's one issue. Another item is that the vendor, their initial switchgear estimates, that $335,000, they were using an assumed number of breakers in the box. They were assuming a certain number of breakers. Each of those breakers is $20,000 to $40,000. So I think they used a five breaker count. We're looking at 9 to 10 now. So that alone nearly accounts for that cost difference right there.
So I have a question for you. Sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
So why, if we had a consultant come in like Cundiff to help us get a estimated cost of what this was going to, what this was going to cost the agency, why it's so off? And then, I guess my other question is, and then you met with them again to provide this update.
We've been working with Cundiff for the last year or so after the study in the active project.
Yeah.
So that's a good question.
Because I mean, it's a large amount, and
It definitely is. One big piece of that is based on an assumption from the vendor. You know, it's about $90,000 of that in the breaker count alone. And again, at that point, we did not have a detailed design to base, I guess, a better estimate on. So, you know, when you're talking an assumption of a certain number of breakers, and then you get into a detailed design a year or 2 years later, that's going to affect that base cost significantly, which is what we're seeing. The rest of these items, actually, if I can jump here, the couple other items, the PGE design requirements also changed in a 2-year span, where their communications requirements, where they're situating their pull boxes and how they're connecting to their communications equipment. Those requirements actually changed and added about $20,000 to that base, again, that base switchgear cost here, the top guy. And then the last one, as you know, key building materials, and in this case, we're talking heavy-duty electrical hardware. Steel and copper are critical to that equipment, and those are materials that really have increased significantly.
Just in the past 2 years?
Over the past 2 years, with foreign demand, namely really elevating the cost of that building equipment, or that building material. And that, frankly, is a frequent challenge of projects that span multi-fiscal years. You know, you're always trying to keep ahead of inflation and accounting for that. So, Commissioner Keough, to get back to your question, could we have caught some of these? We probably could have, to a certain degree. But again, because our focus was more on feasibility, you know, and a very preliminary study, we had not gotten into the depth of a detailed design, where we were looking at what are the specific equipment needs at the plant, how is the generator going to talk to the plant. And we had not got into that. We did not hire kind of engineering at that point to take us there. Now that we are at that point in the design phase, this is why we're bringing these costs forward. So the good news is the contingencies. We did include about $400,000 worth of contingencies in the overall budget. So obviously, it's not great practice to use up your contingencies before you start construction. But the contingency as it stands does cover those costs, the increase, the $243,000. Another point I'd like to make is that we have not yet even negotiated a guaranteed maximum price with Oregon Electric to do the construction. While we have estimates of what the construction is going to cost, we really aren't going to know what that cost is until we negotiate a price. The market is still at a point where competitive bids are kind of taking the day still. We recognize Oregon Electric's experience and abilities. We're consider that they will be giving us a good price. You know, if there were issues with the pricing, we would negotiate that. If we ran into problems with that, we have the ability still to say we're going to take this out to the market and bid it. That's part of the CMGC process.
And then now, even without the generator, we still had to upgrade our switchgear.
Correct.
Correct. I remember that from the other, like, when, in fact, we found that out through the generator project, that we had serious issues with it.
Right. The key electrical equipment in the plant is old.
Yeah.
And it's been well maintained, but it's 40, 45, almost 50 years old, some of it.
It was switching on and off by itself at times, wasn't it?
There were breakers that were sticking or not able to lock off. You know, issues like that you kind of want to get in and address those.
Yeah, no surprises on that.
Right. So you're correct there. Looking at the safety aspect, the reliability aspect of the equipment, that definitely is a key consideration here. And I want to try to keep the focus on the big picture because this is a key piece of equipment that affects the overall project. Like I said, it's controlling how power is going to be fed to the whole plant and the low lift pump station down the river.
And what do you mean by accessory motor control equipment?
I want to make the point that, just kind of building off the contingency comment, that, like I said, obviously if we use up a lot of contingency now, that leaves us less in the future. We do know of a couple things that may be coming potentially additional costs beyond the estimated costs. Those include a design and motor control equipment. I'm going to jump ahead here. The motor control centers, when we go from the switchgear, I should have brought a schematic, I apologize, but when we go from the switchgear outside the plant and then to the plant itself, that power is distributed to motor control centers or motor starters for each major piece of equipment, like our pumps. Let's just think of the pumps for right now. Those control the pump's operation. We know that through the study we recognize that there's deficiencies with those, and that's what led us into the electrical upgrades piece of the project, not just there's the generator, there's the electrical upgrades. So knowing that we have upgrades to other main pieces of the plant, the motor control centers, what we want to ensure is that when we essentially replace those, we want to bring back the functionality and the control aspects of those units so that our staff can operate them the same or better, and that they're going to meet the needs of our operation, of our pumping processes.
The parameters that we have currently that we're dealing with are for motors that essentially are what, anywhere from 10, 15, 20, 25 years old, right?
Yes. We've got
So
some
as
little
technology
pumps out
goes
there.
forward to move itself into a more yet efficient mode of electrical operation in the motors, it requires different starters so as to take and facilitate the correct flow of electricity to them. So we have to look at purchasing motor starters that not only are going to work on motors of the future where technology will dictate, we have to consider that we have some older motors at this time, and we can't afford to make two purchases, one for old ones and one for new ones.
We probably would have to upgrade to a certain degree if we went and overhauled and replaced all of our pumps. We're not doing that in this project. Essentially, we're keeping the pumps. You know, those are pieces of equipment that you can maintain, you can rebuild, you can.
Right, I'm just talking about the motors.
Yeah, the motor starters, correct.
Yeah.
Yep. So what my point was here is that we should recognize that just like we had to do with the switch gear, just like we're seeing with the switch gear, although the order of magnitude should be much less, there are aspects of those motor control centers that we'll want to look at for these same categories: safety, health, life, health, safety, reliability. Probably not as much control. Well, control monitoring too. So I wanted to bring that forward because we're talking about costs and talking about contingencies, and I wanted to bring that out. These are potential other increases. Another.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
how much contingency did we build in? I don't have that.
400,000?
It's about 400,000. And I say about because there's a direct contingency in the budget. There's also some contingency built into some of the items, some of the specific items themselves. And the reason for that is just the way that we broke it out when kind of did their estimate and included a pretty hefty contingency, and then we worked that into our CIP budgeting for this project.
And what I was looking for really was the percent, what percent contingency?
The kind of study was about 20%, and I think the way that converted over into our CIP budgeting was a little bit less than that. But again, that includes our CIP budgets. The 3.2 million includes a lot of indirect costs, in-house labor, in-house equipment, certain things that we may or may not use all of from a cost standpoint. So while I don't want to be overly optimistic, I'm just saying that there could be areas where there's savings, not just the construction costs, which I still believe there could be. Could the overall project go over budget? Yeah, there's a chance it could.
20% of a large number is at least some comfort.
It is. And again, could we have taught some of these things early on? Yes, we could have, to a certain degree. And again, that kind of breaks down to preliminary design versus a real nuts and bolts design that we're in today. The other item, futuristically, is another change. The National Fire Protection Association Code 70E, that's just the subpart, is kind of our design guideline for this project. And while it's not a code per se, it is a nationally recognized standard, just like we would use AWWA standards to design water facilities. NFPA 70E is an electrical standard that we're utilizing for the generator. Safety and reliability are key pieces of that. And from an industry standard, contractors today are about 10 years behind that update. 2012 NFPA 70E is 10 years ahead of where most contractors are today. and some consultants, I'll say.
From the standpoint of education and subsequent licensing?
Common practices, how they're building things.
Mhm.
Because it's not a code, but it's a guideline, it's sort of a best practice. OSHA, Oregon OSHA uses it. They somewhat keep it vague, kind of leave it to the agency to adopt or utilize the guideline. But they do use NFPA 70E as their overarching guideline. So if there was an OSHA, inspection, that's what they would be using as their basis.
So we can just automatically believe that PGE is standing on the same chalk line we are in regards to this 70E electrical standard.
Not necessarily, no.
They're going forward faster than we are?
Not necessarily.
Not even
Because,
that?
Yeah, the big reason there is there's another code, the National Electrical Code, NEC, versus the NESC, I believe. They're under one, while we as a public entity are under another. So what it does is it gives them the ability to go out and maintain high voltage stuff with potentially less liability as almost a public, quasi-public entity, electrical entity, rather than us going out and maintaining or building electrical stuff. So there is a bit of a divergence in who's using NFPA 70, but we as a public agency certainly want to use that as our guideline, and that's been our intent all along. What I'm getting at is with the updates just this year, we're designing to the current standard, which is good. But the issue is that contractors today, most of them are not on the up and up with the updated guidelines, believe it or not.
Well, I guess the bottom line question is kind of designing to this level or not?
Yes, yes.
So,
They are. So where I talk about additional design services costs is bringing in more apprentice experience, and we'll be talking about expanding their scope somewhat to take more of an active role in the design. When we hired Oregon Electric, we put most of the design responsibility in their court. But because of the industry practice, I'm not going to pick on one contractor because it is an industry-wide issue. They would typically not design completely to that standard. A big, I could keep going, but I know we're pushing for time. So what I'm saying is that down the line, we may come back with a request to add some cost to under scope. I don't know what that is at this point, but I do know that we'd be having them take a more active role in design and assisting CRW and Oregon Electric to complete a design for the project.
but that should then reduce the cost of the Oregon Electric side.
Correct. Yes.
Except this code really kicked in 2012, and we did this whole project design, our concept was at least a year older.
Right.
And it's a timing sequencing thing. So Oregon Electric truly believed they did based on industry practice, based on our proposals.
Right.
We came in with Pembroke's help, recognizing the 70E protocol. We chose, because of the OSHA rules and regulations and how they interpret those rules, chose to bump up our designs to that standard. Is that?
Yes, that is correct. And I will say that Oregon Electric has been very good to work with on this front. We have had some discussion along these lines. They're recognizing the issue here, and they've committed to working with us to complete design, even with out-of-pocket costs on their part. So they have been very, very well, very cooperative in this process.
Which should be to their benefit.
Yeah, I mean, they're still, if they continue to perform well, the contract says we'll extend them into construction. That's the big part of the project. And of course, with the kind of PSA, we bring those costs back to the board for approval. That's an active contract. So, just quick in conclusion, we identified items as I summarized there. and forward that information onto Oregon Electric for those critical, what we see as critical switchgear items, so that they can begin the long lead, early release of long lead work. What they have to do at this point is get back to us with submittals so that we can actually officially approve the specific by name equipment, and then we release those for the manufacturer to start building. We recognize that this is a higher cost and higher estimate than original estimates. Contingencies will cover it. However, we may have additional cost design and material or construction-wise in the future. And we'll continue to keep the board informed as we receive more cost information.
Adam, I'd like to ask about timeline. How much of this are we expecting to complete within this fiscal year?
Let's see, June 30. What I'm expecting is in the next, probably the next couple of months, giving Oregon Electric direction to start initial site work. What that means is they can go ahead and start laying out the concrete pad, foundations, and everything for the generator itself. I think they may even be able to bring in some enclosures depending on how some equipment fits in the enclosure. The goal is still looking at late spring, early summer to be conducting the major part of the construction. I won't say commissioning, completion will happen in this fiscal year, but we planned that. Things are maybe a little slower progress-wise than we were hoping. We're working through some of the design questions and things with the contractor, getting on the same page with them. We're working through that. So we're not as aggressive as I was hoping originally. We're probably a couple of months behind that. But I believe we'll still be completing the project in the following fiscal year. I don't see any reason why we wouldn't.
Well, I just was wondering whether we're going to need to look to cut expenses in some other area within this fiscal year.
Good point.
Is PGE going to take and put the DPF on the generator that will be required from DEQ? We've talked about it before. Aren't they assuming that?
Yes.
Okay.
That will be part of the construction.
Good.
Part of the design. Yep.
Thank you, Adam. That detailed and
Yeah,
very
thank you.
thorough
Appreciate your
report and
patience.
update. Moving on to number 6. I believe everyone received, I don't see anything here in regards to applicants to fill in the board vacancy. Are you able to provide an update or confirmation that we've only received one application?
Yes.
Or Dora, is that
Yes.
correct? Just one. And has everyone on the board received it?
Yes, I have.
Commissioner Sterling, you haven't been reading your emails?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
We don't all spend our meetings texting.
I'm not texting.
Oh, well, we're doing something. Well, while we're waiting for whatever information's coming, I move that the CRW Board of Commissioners instruct the general manager to immediately remove the pages currently posted on the Clackamas River Water website identifying employee medical and discipline issues by employee name.
Second.
I don't know what it has to do with this.
Well, we have a motion and a second.
I
If you
don't
guys
know.
want to leave it out there, hey, I don't recommend it.
I don't know if it's really out there. I would
There it
look.
is.
Well, this is a
Barbara.
printout.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sure, oh, yeah, yeah, no, I mean, it is there. This
Well, I
is
would
printed.
have to look on the website and
Well,
see.
do you want to take that chance and leave it? I don't think
Well,
so.
I just like you, I like to be informed of something before I vote on something. And just because you pass something out and say it's so, to me, doesn't mean that it's so.
All right, well, we have a motion and a second.
And you've blanked out the names here yourself?
What?
You've blanked out the names here?
No, Barbara, these are
That's just a
directly
download
off the
directly off
website.
the-
So they're
website.
names that are blacked out.
Look on the bottom of the page, Barbara. So we have a motion and a second.
Are these pages, I don't, she's made them up. Adora, can you please read the motion back?
Here's what I have. Commissioner Holloway moved that the Clackamas River Water Board of Commissioners instruct the general manager to remove pages posted on the CRW website identifying employee names related to medical information.
No, I'll repeat it for you. I move that the Clackamas River Water Board of Commissioners direct the general manager to immediately remove the pages currently posted on the CRW website identifying employee medical and discipline issues by employee name. There are 11 pages that I am aware of. And I've given Mr. Moore a copy, and I've given Commissioner Kehoe a copy.
And how would these are actually on our website?
Yes, they are, Barbara.
And how do
They're
we
going to
get
check
there?
now.
Huh?
to see. They're going to check now to see if this,
Hopefully they won't be by
How
the time they
could
come
these have
back.
got there?
there won't be what?
Mr. Moore put them out there, Barbara. Direct the question to him.
I said they're going to check now to see if these are on there. This may be a moot issue.
Mr. Moore, do you actually manage the website? Do you put items on the website, you yourself?
Not personally.
Okay, we have a staff member that does that, that's
We
outside
have a
of.
couple of people on staff who have the ability to load and unload things.
Commissioner, are you
But
suggesting
you
they operate
yourself-
independently? I don't think so.
No, what I was wondering if Mr. Moore himself placed those items on the website.
Well,
That was my question.
well, the
and
real
he
question
answered it.
is who authorized them to be placed on the website? We can only instruct the general manager, so my motion instructs the general manager to get those removed.
And is
Well,
their
if
website, secure enough that these weren't hacked in?
Well, you asked me to answer a question that
I don't think that's a silly question.
I mean, they're going to go check now.
I think it's very-
Either.
Well,
I mean, because
all I can say is it's there. How it got there, you know, I didn't put it there, guys.
what we did.
They are there.
When the board released Ms. Tamson's report, they were asked to make that information available. And so, like other documents that we were asked to be made available, like the 190 and other documents, we posted it on the website.
Well, technically, the motion
I
was
don't-
simply to make it public, and it was the general
The website
manager's
is one of the.
decision to do a partial redaction.
Well,
But
one of
he,
the-
obviously, there was not a complete.
One of the tools that this agency used, I think at the encouragement of the board, is the website to make things available so people have access to it. Whether or not this specific information is on there, that's what staff is going to check on right now.
Well,
Okay.
Well, if there are items like that on the
We
website,
remove them.
I have no problem voting to have it removed.
It should be removed,
yeah,
if it is.
so let's
yeah.
vote.
No matter
Let's
how
be
it got
honest.
there, it needs to be
Okay, Dora,
taken
can you
off.
call the vote, please?
Commissioner Holloway,
Yes.
Commissioner Kemper,
Yes,
Commissioner Sterling,
Yes.
and Commissioner Kehoe.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0.
Okay, moving on.
then we need to investigate how it got there.
Appointments, so we've received one application, Commissioner Sterling. It is, I believe it's Larry Soa has been the only applicant that has met the deadline for appointment to the open position. So, I'm sorry, I don't know how much involvement you're going to be able to have in this discussion, but we as a board need to figure out what we want to do at this point, if we want to make a motion for appointment. If there's anything on that application you want to discuss, now is the time to do it.
I think we should take the opportunity to interview Commissioner Sullivan. Former Commissioner Sullivan. of the Clackamas County Commission, not currently a commissioner of Clackamas River Water.
Yes,
He's
there's
not here
absolutely
tonight.
no way that he cannot be brought in and have a Q&A put forward to him, and it needs to be in the public so that the ratepayers can see exactly what positions he has and what direction he's going. Especially since he used to be a commissioner with the DECC.
I think what this
Previously.
board should do is possibly come up with some questions for the applicant, compile those, put them together, put it in written form, have him perhaps provide a response, as opposed to being blindsided, because I'm actually quite frankly concerned about what you two might do. And I think that anyone who's applied should have the opportunity to be able to review questions and have time and forethought before they respond.
What about board policy that says you will not insult commissioners during meetings?
That wasn't an insult. Well, you know,
Excuse
frankly,
me?
Pat, I don't know what does insult you and what doesn't.
Well, now you have a clue.
Okay. So is there any other discussion in regards to a process?
Well, in the first place, I'm just very concerned that this board, this district, cannot get applicants for a vacant commissioner position. I've attended Sunrise meetings when they were appointing a new commissioner who's here today. And they from one of 7 zones in their district, essentially 1/7 of their district, they had about 10 really very qualified people apply. And there's some reason people do not apply, are afraid to apply for appointment as a commissioner in this district. And I feel very sad for this district that, and for the ratepayers of it, that condition exists, that people are afraid to become a commissioner here.
I agree, Barbara. I think that's a great sentiment to
Nothing we can do about it.
to
personally.
express, and I think part of it
I
is.
just wanted it on record.
Thank you, thank you. And, you know, I was pretty shocked myself that we only had one applicant, but I think it's a very, I think it's probably one of the best applicants we could receive, especially in the type of atmosphere that this agency currently has been experiencing. To have someone with these credentials, this kind of government and legislative background, be willing to apply. I think that, yes, this board probably should receive further information in regards to this applicant and how they could possibly assist us. But on the other hand, we only have one applicant. And therefore, with that in mind, I think we need to pick a process that is going to be speedy, because we have to make a decision. And if this board can't agree on it, then it needs to go to the Clackamas County Commission, and that needs to happen sooner rather than later. And because we have one applicant, we need to figure out what that process is going to be.
What's the timeline that you're referring to, Jill?
Timeline in regards to replacement?
And subsequently having the BCC do it?
It's basically after a vote. It's after a vote.
I've given you my input, and my suggestion bears no relationship whatsoever to my view of Mr. Sella. It's just that I think that this board is going to be negligent if we don't take the opportunity to have him come before us and give us an opportunity to talk to him.
Well, I don't feel as though he needs to come before us. If there's certain questions that we want to compile and send to him and have him respond and write back, that's sufficient for me.
Mm,
Do you have
close, but-
particular concerns about him, Pat? You know, see, he used to be my vet, that's the only way I knew him other than here, but, he was on our budget committee.
Yeah, I understand,
And
Commissioner.
we got a chance to see
I
him
understand
in a
that.
fair, I thought he was really fairly neutral.
I understand
Doing
all of
that.
that. This has nothing to do with Commissioners, or Mr. Soto at all. I think that as a reasonable board process, we should do exactly what Sunrise did, which was bring the candidate, in this case we only have one.
No, they had multiple candidates, which is
Well-
why they did an interview process. We only have one. And
I don't know why they did an interview process, Commissioner, but I think it's a reasonable process that they did, and I would like to do us do the same thing. It's not uncomplicated.
Yeah, and we can submit questions in advance to him, and he can prepare himself to have answers for the questions that we put forward to him. And he can come in the opportune time to have it announced, so the ratepayers can come and see who this person is.
You know, what's wrong with that?
Well, because we only have one applicant, I really don't see the point of having that applicant come in. If we have questions, go ahead
That's
and
all-
send them.
that is-
In fact, I've already asked him my questions.
That is all the more
I-
reason why we need to take and make sure that Dr. Soa is here, because we only have one person that stepped forward. That's the principal reason that we should make sure that he's here, that the ratepayers see, oh, here's the guy that's going to be replacing. Here's the guy that can alter the very structure of CRW with his vote. He needs to come in and speak to the ratepayers.
I can tell you what will happen if we don't choose whatever we have. It will go to the Board of County Commissioners, and they will choose who they want. And we will have no say in
Well,
what their stands are on anything.
Commissioner Kemper.
So I don't know
Well,
what you're
number
thinking
one,
of here.
Commissioner Kehoe has elected to go talk to Dr. Soa privately.
No, it was during a budget meeting.
Well, you just said you had all your questions answered.
I have.
Okay, well, that's fine, okay.
So, I don't know why you're making it sound as though
Okay,
it's some
well,
big
all right,
conspiracy.
okay,
He
I
was
missed-
here on our budget committee, and he was here at multiple meetings.
Okay, so then please correct me if am I incorrect. You have not discussed with Dr. Soa his coming onto the board.
No, I have not.
Okay, fine, that's all, I misunderstood what you said. I still believe that we should take this opportunity, and I do believe, I agree with Grafton, that the ratepayers and staff need to have the same opportunity to listen to the answers to the questions. I mean, I certainly have things I'm curious about.
Well, I know that a lot of people who become commissioners really know very little about the agency when they come. They learn as they go, they may have certain things they come in that they want to see done, but they may change their minds as they get more into the process of what is needed. So, I think we might get some answers from him, but I don't know how important they are in the long run. It's kind of hard to say. It's like, we don't have 10 people to choose from, or even 3.
Well, I understand that, Barbara, but
Well, I don't think we have time during a meeting to do an interview. I think if you have questions for Mr. Soa, write them out. Did he provide us with a contact information, with an email or phone number?
Commissioner, I want all the information, any questions to be shared by the entire board and by whomever's in the meeting. It's that uncomplicated. This is a public process. We are choosing a commissioner for a public entity.
And my
so I
suggestion
don't-
is, if we have questions,
Well, okay,
write them down and submit them. Give him an opportunity to respond.
I need to be frank, I have real concerns about somebody who's going to be volunteering here, sitting up there at the table, and you two.
You'd rather wait and surprise them later? Is that the idea, Kemper? Huh? You'd rather surprise them later?
And,
Or hopefully
now
they
what is
go
that-
your direction?
What is
No,
that
but-
stuff
but-
in board policy about not insulting commissioners,
you-
Commissioner?
Could you promise to be civil? That's all
come
I
on.
ask. In dealing with him. That's all.
We
I
have
ask.
nothing against this man.
Yeah.
We thanked him repeatedly for coming forward in the budget process. Did you hear what I just said?
Yeah.
Okay?
I mean,
I
so,
just
Commissioner
would
Kemper,
like, if he comes here, that we treat him civilly and.
just step
Is
back.
that
Well,
something
you
Just
know
step
what,
back a second.
actually, I'm gonna make a motion just to appoint him,
Okay.
because we only have one candidate. We only have one person that's applied, and that's it. And we need to take some sort of action. So I'm just going to move that we appoint Larry Soa as a commissioner to CRW to replace Mike Cardwell.
You made a motion.
I did.
I'll second your motion for discussion.
Thank you.
So I'm voting no. Unless he comes in and takes and answers some questions and appears before the ratepayers, under your motion you're putting forth, I'll vote no.
Okay. Let's just vote, get it over with, and then bump it up to the county commission. Adora, can you
Commissioner
call the
Holloway?
vote, please?
I think we need to have a little discussion here, please. Commissioner, I truly don't understand why you are not willing to have the board invite Dr. Soa here to a public meeting. I'm perfectly happy to submit any questions in advance, so he's not taken by surprise. I don't understand why you are taking the position, by what you have done, of forcing it to a county commissioner situation when that doesn't need to happen. I don't understand it.
Well, you know, because history tells me that you are not going to be civil in this process. I think that's a
Commissioner,
big
you-
reason why
Point of order.
why we only
Point
received.
of order.
You wanted an answer. I'm telling you, just because you don't like it,
Order.
doesn't mean it's a point of order, Pat. You
Hello?
asked me a question,
Point of order.
and I'm
Is
answering
a
it.
commissioner insulting another commissioner?
Okay, well, I do not mean or intend to insult you. I'm just telling you how I see it and why I made the motion. And that's what you asked me to do. And so the other reason is because we have not been able to come to an agreement on most ways that we vote. So I'm not wasting any more time. We need a replacement. We need to get business done for this agency. I think it's a disservice to do to the ratepayers, to staff, and our own time to keep wasting it. I'm moving forward. That's my motion.
Well, I'm going to abstain, and I will state my reason. I'm abstaining because I believe that the full board,
Are you, Adora, did
Needs-
you call the vote?
I did, I said
Okay,
Commissioner
thank you.
Holloway, and she's abstaining, and
Thank you.
yeah, if you would please stop interrupting, Commissioner. I am abstaining because I believe that the full board and the CRW ratepayers deserve to have the Board of Commissioners refer any questions that they may have to Dr. Soa and have him respond to those, and that be public information. I think everyone then has a higher level.
No, that's not what you stated before. You didn't want to go the question route ahead of time, because I asked you to do that, and you said no,
Tammy,
you wanted him to come before us.
Tammy,
No, I made the suggestion, and you didn't agree with it, which is why I made my motion.
I didn't say
So-
that at all.
Well, you did.
No. You know,
Okay,
you're
Adora,
setting
you
the course
continue.
here.
Commissioner
Continue on.
Kemper. We're voting on the motion to appoint Larry Soa We're
We're
voting
voting
on.
on the motion to appoint Larry.
Right.
It's your vote.
Okay,
So
you know,
Commissioner
as far
Kehoe is,
as far as I'm concerned, he's an unknown, but he's had experience in a board. He knows how to work on a board. He's an unknown. I have no idea whether you fall in one camp or another, but I have an idea to be neutral.
and the
I'll say
two
yes.
of you are putting the board in the position of forcing it to go to the Board of County Commissioners because you are unwilling to allow us to ask questions and get answers, correct? That's your choice.
Can you continue on?
Commissioner Sterling?
Commissioner Holloway, if I follow your path in order to get Dr. Soa to come and abstain, that means then there's two voting for him. Is that enough for it to pass? Then I'm going to abstain also too.
Motion fails 2-0-2.
Okay, now can we talk about getting Dr. Soa here now real quickly?
No, it's done. It's going to the county commission.
You don't, you
How
have to
how
have
is it going
authority
to the
to
county
send it.
commission?
You don't have
You don't have the authority
Commissioner.
to do that. That has to be a
It's
board
state law.
issue.
State law.
No, no, no,
The
no,
board
no.
cannot agree.
It's state law.
Well, so,
Okay,
so
moving on
you
to
have,
number
you have
7.
forced this board.
Well, you could have voted yes.
Well, and let me point this out to you.
All right, I'm
You
not
don't-
wasting,
no,
you're not
you don't
wasting
know
any more of my
who.
time, Pat.
No,
No,
it
I'm
is
not allowing
you
you to.
wasting the ratepayers' time. You have no idea.
Well, no, I just
You
saved the
could get-
ratepayers a lot of time.
You could get Mickey Mouse now. You have made that choice. And you insulted Dr. Saw.
It's no wonder nobody wants to run
You set a
this.
situation
Yeah.
you knew would end up
No,
as a failure. So you have deliberately insulted him and eliminated, potentially, his opportunity to serve on the board.
We're in
Why
a-
would you do that?
Oh, do you have an update?
Well, I guess I would have a recommendation. If you're declaring the board deadlocked, my recommendation would be is that you need to agree that you're deadlocked, because that's what you would have to tell the county commissioners. And they would probably need some kind of a formal letter from this board indicating that.
Signed by all board members or just Kehoe?
I mean, it's your process, but I would think that
Well, we already took a
formally you
vote.
haven't really done that yet.
Well,
you know.
within a meeting, we can have a reconsideration. And I would say that I would ask that we reconsider in courtesy to Dr. Soa, that the 4 board members be allowed to send him any questions that we may have, give him the opportunity to respond in writing, to be prepared, and to come to the next board meeting with that information, or a special meeting in the interim.
Let's boil it down, make it
Fine.
even simpler. Each of us submit 5 questions. We'll all sit down, the board members together, and put forth our 5 questions. There's got to be some of them that are repetitive. That way then we can combine them and get it reduced down to a simple manageable level that we all can agree on. Of the 5 that we submitted for a total of 20, we could probably get it reduced down to maybe 7 or 9 questions that he can answer in 25 words or less.
All right, we're
We can
moving on to
subsequently
number-
put those questions on a
The motion's
letter
already
to
been
him.
made, the vote's already been taken. We need to move
Well,
on to number
no.
7.
Okay,
There can be a reconsideration.
Now, this is how come no one wants to come and serve here, Kehoe. It's just that easy. You need to look in the mirror.
I will make the same point, Board of Commissioner.
You can even read your email, Commissioner Sterling.
All
You
right.
knew we had appointments. You knew we had applicants, and you didn't even bother to review them. So, please,
There was only one
save
there,
me.
a very nice man. I encouraged to come and serve on the budget committee that I thanked multiple times.
Okay.
Okay, I move.
The ratepayers is the issue here. They deserve the opportunity to see who it is that's going to be appointed. They need to hear from that person what their ideas are and their goals about taking over the position.
I move,
Gee, many Christmas. Try to think of somebody else besides yourself.
I move that the board reconsider the previous vote and that we each prepare if we wish, a list of no more than 5 questions to submit to Dr. Soa and ask him to respond.
That wouldn't be a part of reconsidering the vote, Pat.
Hmm?
You either,
Oh,
you just reconsider the vote.
Well, okay, well, then I move that we reconsider the vote, create the opportunity for that dialogue.
I second it. I'll call for discussion. No discussion?
We can even call a special meeting for that purpose.
Sure.
Not my intent to delay, it's just my intent to have a proper process.
Commissioner Holloway?
Yes.
Commissioner Kemper?
You either reconsider the vote, or you don't reconsider the vote. You don't make a new motion as a part of reconsidering the vote.
Well, I said reconsider the vote.
So we are going to reconsider the vote, period.
Well, what I actually, I think the proper way to do it is to say, I move that we reverse the previous vote and continue with discussion.
You can't reverse the previous vote, you can reconsider your
I
vote.
think it's just reconsider, Pat, is all you need.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
what
what you do.
I'm not,
You're familiar with Robert's rules.
well,
Reconsideration is,
yeah, reconsideration is
You've done it.
allowed. I just want to be sure that it would be silly to go through a process of simply repeating it. So if the proper terminology is to reconsider the vote that we just took, my motion is to reconsider the motion that we just took.
I second.
reconsider the motion? Reconsider,
Reconsider the vote, sorry.
to reconsider the vote.
Reconsider the vote.
Okay, Adora, you want to
I
read it
have-
back so everybody knows?
Commissioner Holloway moved that the board reconsider the vote.
Okay, and I seconded it,
Uh-huh.
okay?
And Commissioner Holloway voted yes? Okay.
Yes.
And Commissioner Kemper?
We're voting on reconsidering the vote, we're not voting on the
Right.
motion. Okay, I'll vote yes.
Commissioner Sterling?
Yes?
And Commissioner Kehoe?
No.
Motion carries 3-1.
Okay, well, let's see if we can get some brief agreement here, Kemper.
No, we are reconsidering the motion.
Now we have to vote on the motion again.
That's what we don't do a new one. If
It's
you're
the
voting to
same
reconsider
motion,
the
that's why
vote,
it's a stupid
you
thing
reconsider the
to
vote.
vote on, because you're gonna vote the same way.
Well, Commissioner, you may have made up your mind.
That's why I voted no on your motion.
That's why a person usually asks to reconsider a vote, is that they're going to change the vote.
Because they're gonna change their vote, and you don't plan on doing that,
All
so.
right, okay, well, Commissioner, since we're going to reconsider, we can have discussion. My recommendation is that we establish the same kind of reasonable process that other water boards have carried out, that rather
The motion
than-
is for the
yes.
appointment of Mr. Soa,
Okay,
and that's
well-
what we're voting on. So
Well, if
you can
you're-
say whatever you
okay.
want to, it's not gonna change the motion.
Okay, well, you're right, Barbara, it's an exercise in futility. Yeah, I guess, since nobody's willing to budge, I guess I just have to withdraw my motion. And,
We already voted on it, Pat. We-
well, okay, well, all right, okay, then do it again, Call
I'll
it.
vote again.
Okay, again.
This is the motion this is the
For Dr. Soa.
reconsideration for the motion to appoint Larry Soa to the board vacancy. Commissioner Holloway?
Commissioner Holloway abstains.
Commissioner Kemper?
Yes.
Commissioner Sterling?
Now you got me confused, that's for sure. So we're voting on the same thing again?
Correct.
Well, I'm going to abstain then.
Commissioner Kehoe?
Yes.
Motion for reconsideration fails 2-0-2.
You know,
No, that was-
all
and
the
then
way
the
it's-
revote
it's entirely
failed.
possible that
The
we can
revote
get the
failed.
BCC
That's why I said
to
the motion
ask
to,
him questions
or,
about
I'm
the
sorry,
public
the second time the motion was read, to appoint Larry
All
Soto.
right, I'm
That
moving
still
on to
fails.
Agenda item number 7. Do you have an update for us on number 7?
No, the board, as I've indicated in my manager's report, this is deadlocked 2-2. And I think this was placed on here by the board, not by me. So
For number 7,
that's the one I'm referring to,
to the 190?
yeah.
Okay, so moving on to number 8.
Wait.
Oh, okay.
On what are you, well, let me start with the statement of fact. The board authorized a subset of commissioners to undertake exploratory conversations. The board authorized the funding of a feasibility study. Where we stand at the moment is that the group of 8, in fact, came up with the proposed 190, and the board has not received any feasibility study. We received no financial information, etc. So at this point, there, so far as I can see, is no action to be taken relative to the 190. I am quite concerned, actually, that absent an instruction from the board, someone, and I assume it was Mr. Moore, I don't think it was Ms. Bright on her own volition, put out a 190 statement in the CRW August bill that was unauthorized. There is no authority from the board at all to go anywhere, so I don't think it's, I don't.
What did the statement say in the billing that you have concern about?
Well, you wouldn't know, you don't pay a water bill, right? Sorry,
No, I do pay a water bill.
not our water bill.
Not-
Well, that's right, you don't get our water bill. You
don't buy
haven't
our
seen
water.
it.
Sorry.
So,
Well,
then
Mr.
we're
ask,
moving
ask,
to my
please ask,
question. No.
ask Mr. Moore
I'm
for a
not-
copy, it's his stuff,
I'm not asking
not
Mr.
mine.
Moore, I'm asking you what your concern is.
I don't
with
have a
what was
copy
in
of
the
the
bill.
building commissioner. Ask
Okay,
Mr. Moore
so
for a copy.
what is your concern with the information that was provided to the public?
It wasn't authorized by the board.
Okay,
That
so
action
your
was not
concern
authorized.
isn't the content of it. It's the fact that you're upset with him because he authorized this statement to be placed out there
Commissioner,
without your knowledge and without your permission. So you
without,
have no concern with the content.
Commissioner, would you,
Well,
Which?
I'm trying to clarify, because I
Okay.
don't know why you have,
well, if you'll stop and listen,
okay.
rather than telling you what I'm thinking. Number one, beyond the work the group of 8 did, there is no board authorization to do anything relative to the 190, period.
So what was in that
And-
content that you have
and-
concern about? Did it say that we're voting on it? Did it say that there was a future hearing? Did it say that there was going to be an open house? What is
Ms.
your
Bright, would you
concern?
go get copies of it? I'm sure that's around your desk or somewhere in there, the flyer insert. And that way then,
I don't know,
it
you
can-
don't have
it-
to,
it
because
can
I
be-
get an
What
idea
do you mean, of course
of
she
what-
needs to.
no,
It needs
'cause
to
I
be
have an
entered into
idea of
record
what the
here.
problem is, that they can't remember what the statement was,
Oh.
because that's
No,
not
I'm
what
asking
their
you, Ms. Bright,
concern
if you'd go
is.
get the copy.
Ms.
So I'm
Kimo,
not-
you're,
I don't care what it
You're-
says, because I know what the issue is
you
now.
are a member of the board. You have a responsibility to be familiar with that stuff, even though
Okay.
you're not a CRW customer. So
Okay.
were I you?
No,
would ask Mr.
now
Moore-
I know what the
Mr. Moore.
true issue is. And it has to do with authority, as opposed to the content of what the public
I
has received the
know.
information.
I-
And so I'm not,
Cammy, I didn't say that. Do not put words in
you
my
didn't
mouth.
have to say it.
All
I
I'm
get an
saying
idea,
is that
because
the-
you haven't told me what the statement said, because you can't remember, because that wasn't your concern. Your concern has to do with authority. Has nothing to do with the information the public received.
Commissioner, I would really appreciate it if you would stop.
Then tell me what the statement
Pretending to
stated.
read my mind. I don't have it in front of me,
No, it's-
and I am not going to speak to something I don't have in front of me. Ms. Bright, would you please
See?
go get a copy of it?
No, I don't care,
Well,
because
okay.
I know what the problem is.
Well, the
So-
problem is,
The problem
it's
is
just
it was
this
done
simple.
without
Mr. Moore
authority.
gave a endorsement to the 190 that he wasn't authorized to give. And that's what the ratepayers call and say, what's going on with this endorsement of the 190?
You
What's
consider
happening
that
to
an
our water?
endorsement?
It's just that easy.
Okay,
I thought it was
so,
announcing that this situation is happening, there'd be public meetings.
okay, so
Mind
is there
you-
any future action this board wants to take right now with the 190? Because if not, then I'm moving on.
It
Well-
needs to stop spending ratepayers' money on it, period. It's a dead issue, just as dead as could be.
Okay, let's move on, number
And
8.
the board should be receiving the feasibility study that it paid to have done. And it has not received.
Move on to number 8.
So that's history. It's something that is
Well,
overdue.
actually, what I would recommend we do is we just waive, go into number 8, and
Just read it. Thank you.
I'm done.
Thank you. Okay.
Now, you need to
No,
understand
that's
that you've got
not
to stop
acceptable.
spending ratepayer money on this 190.
I'm not spending ratepayers' money on 190, Mr. Grafton. I guess you need to get your facts straight first.
Well, what do you call spending ratepayer money to publish that in the flyer in the rate?
That was a staff effort. There was
Staff
no
effort?
rate, there was no rate.
Who's in charge of the staff?
I'm in charge of this stuff.
Then you did it.
And how much money did I spend?
You have to tell us.
You have to tell
I
us,
don't
it's a
have to tell
secret.
you anything, Mr.
That's the
Stern.
problem.
You're making an
Say that once again
accusation.
so everybody can hear it. You don't have to tell the commissioners anything.
No, that isn't what I
well,
said.
If it went through billing statements,
It went in the
It was an
billing
extra
statement.
piece of
It was an
paper.
informational
It
item.
was extra.
Was it-
There was no endorsement
was
of
it an
anything by
alternative
anyone.
flyer that we spent money on, that we paid postage on?
Yes.
No? Okay.
It was printed, 2 sides. Obviously, we paid
Yeah.
postage. Obviously,
Did
we
we-
paid for printing.
Additional
It's not part of the bill.
Additional postage, Pat?
It was printed, Commissioner.
Yeah.
Was it
And it was
dedicated
inserted
solely
in
to
a
the
bill?
190?
Commissioner,
Nope.
I
if you don't
it.
understand that printing costs money, I can't help you. It is not acceptable.
We did not send it out to a printer.
Okay.
And that costs money. Yeah, right. That's what I was
You
saying.
know what, you're costing us money
Okay.
right now,
So-
so I'm moving on.
No, you can't. We are going to discuss number 8. There are several issues under it that are very important. The 190 was certainly one. Second, relative to item E, the South Fork Board rate discussions. Mr. Moore made a representation in here about executive session material. And I think actually, probably technically, he didn't violate executive session because the
Thank you.
statement is not correct.
Well, please, violate executive session and
And-
correct it for us.
And you, in public meeting, Commissioner, and Mr. Moore in public meeting, have repeatedly said that the South Fork Water Board will not meet with the Clackamas River Water Board because of Commissioner Sterling and Commissioner Holloway. Now, when Mr. Moore published this little dissertation, after us having an executive session in which our rate consultants presented information to the board, which Mr. Moore has refused to provide to the board, I called John Collins because of that and Mr. Moore's comment during that meeting, which I haven't stated. And Mr. Collins said, just to get this straight,
Yeah, he called me.
good, that quite a long time ago, there was a conversation about board-to-board discussions that fell by the wayside for 18 months or so. Then, in a breakfast meeting with Mr. Moore suggested to Mr. Collins to have a subset of the South Fork Water Board and a subset of the CRW board meet. Mr. Collins told Mr. Moore, according to Mr. Collins, that he advised Mr. Moore that the South Fork Water Board was not willing to meet with a subset of the CRW board, and that is the extent of the limitation. They placed no restrictions on meeting with the full CRW board. So I just wanted to make that clear. And
Did you ask him if that conversation had anything to do with negotiating the rates?
well,
That's the context in which the statement was made.
as I read the settlement agreement that Mr. Moore and Mr. Phillips worked out with South Fork and Judge Sterling, the process is that South Fork provides a proposed rate. Our rate consultant reviews it. Unfortunately, Mr. Moore has refused to provide the board with a copy of the rate consultant's report that the ratepayers are paid for.
I did better than that. I brought the rate consultant here for you to talk to him personally.
And you specifically, no, you didn't do better. In that, you specifically refused. You have refused his report to us. And you won't deny that, I'm sure.
That's
You
absolutely
did.
correct. It upset David too, that he wasn't able to.
Pat,
So
what
we-
we're talking about is item E. It says South Fork Water Board rate discussion. There's
Right.
nothing that you just talked about that has anything to do with the rate
It has
discussion.
everything to
When you
do
talk
with-
about a breakfast meeting between John Collins and I, that was not about water
Okay.
rates.
You-
So you need to put things in context. If you're gonna say that I said or did something, you need to know what the heck you're talking about.
They are in
contract-
context.
the
They're
Mr.
not in
Collins was
context.
not,
Just because you
Mr.
say
Collins
they're in
was not
context doesn't
confused
make
and he
them so.
wasn't
I'm
mistaken.
leaving at 9 and I'm gonna adjourn the
Yeah,
meeting.
that's my point.
And I'm
I mean,
getting
Leave
tired-
now.
Done. I think
Well,
we're done.
no, I'm getting tired of listening to you.
Okay.
Make allegations. I'd like the public. Are there any public comments? I think I have
Commissioner,
people
I am
signed up.
going to finish this subject.
That's
Now,
why
we
Mr.
have-
That's why Mr. Collins called
Okay,
me, because
so-
he knew you were gonna try this crap.
Okay, so
No,
I'm going
Tammy,
to,
stop.
I'm going to adjourn the meeting.
Mr. Moore,
I'm going to adjourn the meeting. So
Are
I
you
would like
going
to
to
hear from the
bring-
public as opposed to you. Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak before I adjourn the meeting? I have 2 people
okay,
signed up.
Commissioner, so you're,
And I'm going to call them right now.
okay, so you're agreeing with Mr. Moore, Commissioner, that
Warren Mitchell.
we paid for a study
Warren
and
Mitchell.
information that the general
Warren Mitchell.
manager is refusing
going
to
to make a
give
comment
us.
or
When you
no?
guys are finished, yeah.
Okay,
And
no,
he is-
right now, I'm not going to call your name again.
And the
Did you
general
have a comment?
manager
No?
is
Okay.
blaming the
Cindy,
board
Louis Wolfram?
for the problem when he won't bring anything to the board. That's what he says in his
Pat, you know
purple
better.
page.
You know better. You're just staging yourself.
No, I've
up
been
there.
reading,
That's
Mr.
all you're
Moore.
doing.
I
Good
can
evening,
read, and that's what you said.
My name is Cindy Lewis Wolfram. I live in Milwaukee. I am a
Well, you think
ratepayer.
it's funny, I think it's
And
serious.
I'm
think
here
it's
to make a
hilarious.
comment this evening regarding the way that some of these procedures have gone, especially with regards to insulting Dr. Sauer. The only person that applied for a position here is, the whole discussion of that is amazing to me. That you have one person who has applied here, a person who you know and you've worked with, a person who's worked for our county throughout, and yet you deny the ratepayers an ability to have someone come and sit on the board so that things can get going forward. You need a fifth vote here, people. You only got 2-2 going on right now. I understand the reluctance of trying to find a way to work some of these discussions out when some commissioners just seem to want to discuss ad infinitum. But to not be willing, excuse me, sir, I have the floor right now. Can I come back up and speak with you?
No, I'm gonna adjourn after you're done.
I just don't feel comfortable with Mr. Mitchell here.
You feel threatened by him?
I do.
Mr. Mitchell, could you please sit back in the back of
I
the
have a
room?
public comment to make, I asked after you guys were done.
Yeah, you can't play favorites.
I should not say that, I've asked for him to.
I gave
asked
him the
to leave.
opportunity to speak and he declined. I'm adjourning
Let's
after.
not
You
get
haven't given him an opportunity to speak, how can you
Do
do
you
that?
want to continue?
I heard you're giving him an opportunity. When?
Dr.
We have someone who's providing a comment.
Okay,
so-
Warren, why don't you scoot back, let former
Please.
Commissioner,
Can
what's
you
her name?
please stop interrupting me, Commissioner Holloway?
And then, well, I'm just trying to stop
Go back
Mr.
another row.
Kehoe from blocking
This
public
is-
comment.
Okay, are
That's
you making
all.
a comment, because I'm
Yes,
leaving,
I
okay.
am going to make the rest of this comment. Dr. Sawa did a very good job for this commission and for the ratepayers with the work that he did. The only time that I've ever seen other commissions question people is when there are multiple people applying. He made a statement, I believe, to you what he can do. Did he not? Did he not give you information when he applied? So, I mean, if he did give you information, that's it. What kind of information do you need? Do you need what he's supplied already? Or do you need to have statements that are lies and exaggerations of the truth, like were put in voters' pamphlets last year, or last election? The situation here requires someone that you can work with. And it's obvious when you can't even get through a reconsiderative vote that you don't have anything but a deadlock going on here. And to try and make it an elongated process, instead of having it be a very simple one, it goes without saying that you just can't continue doing that. And so I think it's a smart move on all of your part to go and ask for help outside of this entity. I spent 4 weeks after Mike Cardwell resigned talking to various leaders in the community, talking to people throughout the community, asking them to come and sit, to apply so they could sit. Every single one of them said that as long as this one member was on the board, they could not put their jobs, families, and reputation in that person's hand. And that person, Commissioner Kehoe, was not you, as Mr. Sterling seems to want to indicate. It was not you. The other things that you discussed tonight, I'll have to wait for another night. I'm sorry, because I'm just a little bit unnerved by being
Thank you.
with this gentleman next to me.
Thank you for your comment. I move to adjourn.
So Kevin, you can't.
That's done.
Well,
How can you treat members of the public